Welcome back. On the show, as you know, we cover current events, but at times we also like to take a look back at history and talk to people who were a part of it. Justus Rosenberg is one of those people. He is a professor of history at Bard College, but 70 years ago, he lived through the Nazi occupation of Europe. In Paris, alone and with no money, Rosenberg, he met an American student, Miriam Davenport. She took an instant liking to him and introduced him to American journalist Varian Fry, who was leading a rescue mission to give Jews safe passage to New York. Rosenberg began working with Fry and eventually helped thousands flee the Nazis. Our senior political producer, Caryn McBride, sat down with him recently, and it's a really amazing story, isn't it?
It is, Rich, thanks. Many people would consider him a hero, but he doesn't. In fact, he's quite modest. And we recently spent an afternoon at his home in Rhinebeck, and he opened up a bit about his past and how fate seemed to lend a hand along his remarkable journey. Professor, let's begin at the beginning of what would become an incredible journey. You're a young Jewish boy. You're living in the free city of Danzig with your younger sister and your parents, who owned a very prosperous import-export business. But then the Nazis rise to power. Anti-Semitism grows. In 1937, your parents suggest that you continue your studies in either England or France. You choose Paris.
Yes, actually, you can well imagine that when I heard that I was going to be sent to Paris, that I loved the idea.
And that was a crucial choice, you've said. You credit two things with saving your life: your youthful looks and also being fluent in French.
There is something else. And I for some strange reason, had a gift to pick up a language very quickly and also get myself versed, for whatever reason, into the culture of that particular language. I took to it like a duck to water.
Then your world, as many others, changed forever in September of 1939. The Nazis invaded. You lost contact with your family. You traveled some 1,300 miles by foot and by bicycle. And you had no one, you had no money, and you took odd jobs.
Yes. Well, look, I'm not the only one. There were thousands and 10,000s and 100,000s of people who were exactly on the same situation I was. Keep in mind, I was in Paris, got to taste the pre-war France from that before the Second World War. That is the more romantic France that existed. Again, then eventually the Germans occupy France. They come close to Paris. Everybody was on the run. And so was I, as best as they could. There were hundreds of thousands of people literally on the road, refugees. I found a bicycle. And so that's how I eventually got to Toulouse. Why Toulouse? Because in Toulouse the rumor was that there were consulates where you can get the visa and you can get out of France.
And that's where you met Miriam Davenport.
Yes, Miriam Davenport. She was an American, and Americans, even in 1940, still had money. And therefore she invited us to eat, of course, and she's the one who told me, listen, if you want to get out of here, I would advise you to come to Marseille, because in Marseille there are more consulates and more embassies, and it also located at the Mediterranean, and therefore it's an open part. And if you come to Marseille, she gave me the hotel where she was staying. And that eventually how I ended up in Marseille.
And that led to your meeting with Mr. Fry.
And that's how eventually I became the courier of the Varian Fry Committee.
You were entrusted with these very important documents. So many people, their fate was depending on this. Certainly dangerous times. Were you ever frightened?
To be honest with you, that sounds really presumptuous. I wasn't really frightened. I wonder whether was it because I was really not confronted with something really tragic and dramatic. Not yet. I sort of sensed there was an evil wind that was blowing. Look, to be involved in something like this, regardless whether you have an ideological commitment or not, for somebody my age, that was something great, because you indeed thought you are now part of an important organization. I learned how people really were fearing for their lives, how difficult it was for some people to accept the fact that they were refugees now. And it bothered me, to be honest with you. I remember, because I realized that I was a courier for an organization which was very exclusive, because it only helped people who were famous, well-known artists and writers. I also realized that basically they were human beings.
Eventually, Mr. Fry left France.
Eventually I was picked up by the Vichy police, the Gestapo Vichy police. I put in a detention camp. It's not a concentration camp, it's a detention camp from where you're going to be sent to a concentration camp. And I remember the date, 24th of August, 1942. That is the year of the great roundup, I call it the great roundup of Jews in Europe all over. It was very hot that night. I couldn't sleep. So we had a blanket. I took a blanket and said, "To hell with it." And I lay down on the grass outside the barracks. And by middle of the night, there's something kicks me in the ribs, and there's a flashlight lighting into my face, and I hear a voice in the dark says, "Qu'est-ce que vous faites là? What are you doing there?" in French. He was a guard. And interesting, was a French guard. And there were, not too many, but there were some who also eventually had some kind of feeling of what, not, he says, "Oh, don't worry." I asked him, I said, "Why am I here?" Because I could tell that there was something in the voice, perhaps, that made me dare to say, I did it because after I told him my story, I never forgot that, he offers me a cigarette. Yeah. Now, I don't smoke, I said, but I begin to realize that offering of a cigarette it somehow denotes some kind of, you don't give it to. And therefore I began to ask him, "Tell me why I am here." And he says, "Oh, don't worry. They are waiting till they're getting a transport together here, and they're going to send you to a working camp in Poland." He believed it, by the way. He didn't know it either. To work. And he says, so I said, "Oh my God, I hear working camp in Poland," and knowing what that meant, no, I didn't like the sound of it. So I said to him, "Listen, could you let me jump the wall, let me go over the wall?" He said, very interesting. He says, "Oh, sure you can." He said, "They don't even know who's here yet. Around the camp, they have station guard, and they may shoot. So you have a better chance on the train to the labor camp." I went in, except I drew my conclusion. I said, "I got to get out of here."
Up next, he did get away, and how he did it is an incredible story. More with Professor Rosenberg straight ahead.